Appraisers have been really kind of nervous, a little scared, a little frustrated, I think is a fair word. There's been a lot of unknowns, and boy, the timing has been horrible. We've been on that cycle of rates going up and up and up and up and up, and business has slowed way down. In fact, it's like a water spigot that got turned off. It didn't really slow down. It kind of stopped. And then you hear of appraisal waivers and all these other things. There's been a lot of rumblings and complaints that everyone's trying to get rid of appraisers. We're a dying breed. We're a dying industry. Where are we going to go from here? We've heard ramblings about the UAD, the redesign, the URAR is going away as we know it today. There's not going to be any forms. We've been told there will be reports. What does all this mean? I have no idea. I hope it means that we're not going to be extinct, like many folks have been predicting. So come on back. I've got a special guest, and we'll dive into all this and much, much more. Come back and join the conversation. Hi, this is Bryan Reynolds. You're listening to the Appraisal Update Podcast, brought to you as always by the great folks over at Appraiser eLearning. You need some education? Check us out over at AppraiserElearning.com. You'll be glad you did. We've got lots of new courses around the bend. We've got some non-CE courses. We've got, just a lot of things happening. Check us out at AppraiserElearning.com. You can also find out about our conference schedule. We're involved in 3 conferences these days, so we're all over the place. The next conference is going to be in San Antonio, Texas in April. That's called the ACTS Conference, the Appraiser Conference and Trade Show. You can find that by going to AppraiserElearning.com and clicking on the events tab. As always, I'd like to thank my sponsor, LIA Administrators and Insurance Services. Check them out at liability.com. Thank you, LIA, for all that you do for the appraisers and certainly your continued support of the Appraisal Update Podcast. All right, I'm super excited. I have a special guest on the program today, Mr. Simon Blackburn. Welcome, Simon. Glad you're here.
Thanks, Bryan. Yeah, happy to be here.
So tell all my listeners and viewers, we have folks that actually watch the broadcast as well on YouTube. And so if you're watching, hi, everybody. Simon, tell everybody a little bit about Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Bryan. As you can tell, I'm not from these parts. I came to the US about 25 years ago, but my background has really been in financial services and I would say software and technology. And relevant, I think, to this conversation, in the recent years, did a lot of work with Wells Fargo and Countrywide and WAMU and a lot of the mortgage companies in their back office, I would say. And then more recently, got involved with a major nationwide appraisal management company. So spent a lot of time in the origination, servicing, cap markets, fintech space, actually. Just, anything to do with, I would say, valuations, real estate valuations and inspections. And then more recently in some of the modernization programs that the GSEs have been running. So so now I run a company. I started a company a couple of years ago called MtgeFi, and really we're just trying to help people provide, give people a comprehensive source of mortgage information, mortgage data for the market to help, finance executives, sales and marketing executives really understand the size of the market, who's ordering, which lenders are ordering different products for different purposes, and really just help them, with their go-to-markets, helping them grow their business.
So that's interesting, mortgage data, and I heard you say identifying lenders, identifying which lenders order what products. What are some of the other meats and bones that MtgeFi does and provides as far as analytics?
Yeah, so we'll help people understand from whether it happens to be on the agency side, the Fannie, Freddie, the FHA, VA, or whether it's on the bank or credit union side, exactly how many loans are being originated, what products, sometimes we have to infer it, but what products they're using to originate those loans. I mean, waivers is something I'm sure we'll talk about, like how many
Sure.
waivers are there? How many appraisals are there? How many other proprietary products are there when it comes to the valuation space? So things like that, really, they're looking for, oftentimes, they're looking for what channel was what channel of origination, and then kind of what products did they use to originate those loans. And then that's obviously on the origination side. And then on the servicing side, there's also when it comes, especially when it comes to default servicing or even home equity, what types of products are they using in those spaces where they may not be traditional appraisals.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of things that appraisers kind of forget about. I mean, a lot of appraisers have done some
Mhm.
foreclosure appraisals or maybe a pending foreclosure, so they're asked to do a drive by. But there's a lot of opportunity for appraisers in that space on the servicing side, right? I mean, there is a
Yeah.
lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, there really is, and I think in home equity as well. There's a lot of organizations that will use, say AVMs and property condition reports, but there's still, I think, the majority using appraisals for home equity loans, HELOCs.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there, and I would say proprietary desktop appraisals as well. Well, obviously that has to be an appraiser that concludes value. So
Yes.
I think a lot just outside the agency world that people are interested in, to be honest.
Yeah. So I want to get into some of that, and I'm going to just put up on the screen here just for a second. You wrote this. It's
Mm.
10 reasons appraisals are here to stay. I'm interested. You've gotten my attention, Simon. So we'll talk about where appraisers can find this if they want to read it. But let's talk about some of these things. Because there's been a lot of naysayers, there's been a lot of negativity, and especially when times are lean and folks are a little slow. And hopefully we've got a turn. The Fed just announced a rate cut.
Yep.
We're expecting more rate cuts. We're expecting cuts through all next year, hopefully, and so that might be really good things for appraisers, refis kicking in, and things of that nature. Because we've been really flatlined for about 3 or 4 years now, and it's been a tough road for appraisers. But during all of this, on top of it, we hear about appraisal waivers, we hear about the old dreaded AVMs coming back, and things like that. So the 10 reasons appraisals are here to stay. You really believe appraisals are not going away, and appraisers will continue to be relevant. So talk about that a little bit. Talk about your blog you wrote.
Yeah, and I put the word appraisals is in that title, but it could equally be appraisers, right? And for the reasons that I think are covered in the blog. So yeah, it's funny. This started. I saw an article posted, and it said, and it said something like Fannie Mae's latest attempt to eradicate appraisers. That was the
Yeah,
title of it.
yeah,
That
yeah.
title has since been changed, actually. So I called the author of that, and I'm like, well, why do you think that? Because that's just never been, that's never the impression, that's never the sort of feedback I've got. But no, I mean, I think that where I come from, which is the UK, there is no standardized form for an appraisal. I mean, it's just a free format document. I
Mhm.
think, and that's because they don't have, GSEs. They don't have. You can only get a basically an adjustable rate mortgage, maybe
Mhm.
fixed for a couple of years, but everything's adjustable. There's no such thing as a 30-year or a 15-year in the
Oh
UK, and
wow.
most of the rest of the world. Most of the rest of the world does not have that. So I think there's two sides to that. One is I think, the securitization, the GSEs and the way that Ginny operates have been, especially the GSEs, have become critical to global finance. I mean, fixed income bonds. And so with that comes, they want to ensure the integrity of the system. They want to standardize the way that loans are originated, loans are underwritten, all the risk management pieces come into play. So, when you look at it, I think you'll see that appraisers are critical because they are the only professional body that are trained. to conclude value. Everybody else is just, AVMs, brokers doing price opinions, all those sorts of things. It's the only profession that's out there, and it sort of underpins everything that really happens in the GSE world. So I would say one is it's an important part, big part of the global finance market. It's very liquid. It's traded all the time. So people really do care about the collateral risk. And then when you start getting into what's happening in the US, I would say the mortgage industry, you start seeing things like UAD, PAVE, all these things that are touched on in that article, which are really saying that we're not trying to fix, we're trying to fix the process. We're not trying to eradicate appraisers from the process. There's a lot of time and effort going into improving the appraisal process and the data. Honestly, clearly the data that's collected and the way it's collected and the way it's used. I mean, that's kind of obvious. And so I think a lot of the initiatives which people can be concerned about, frustrated about, and everything else are really just trying to improve the overall process to make that fixed income market more reliable over time.
So I'm not going to read the whole blog on this podcast, right? The appraisers or whoever watching need to go read it for themselves. But there's a few things I do want to ask you a little bit more information on. So item 5, you say appraisal waivers rely on appraisals. So kind of elaborate on that a little bit. Appraisal waivers rely on appraisals. What does that mean?
Yeah, the GSEs have very large databases of appraisals. Nobody else has them. They do release some of it kind of as they release some sections of it for people to do analysis. So when they create, they are buying loans, securitizing them, releasing to the financial markets. I mean, they want to be very, very sure that the risk profile of these individual loans is to the standards that they set out. So when it comes to waivers, when it comes to appraisal waivers, where there's and what is more in the last year or so, inspection-based waivers, where a property data collection is required, but not an appraisal. They basically look and see if there is an appraisal on record in the last 2 years. I mean, it's a black box. Nobody knows exactly what they do. They don't publish it, but essentially they'll go and look for an appraisal in the last 2 years. So, that naturally governs the amount of waivers that can actually be offered.
Yeah. Do you know what percentage of waivers are taking place? Do you have any insight in how many are actually occurring?
I mean, I can tell you right now, it's around 10% generally. It's around 10%. The only reason it spiked in 2021 in the kind of boom years is because there were so many appraisals done. There were so many refis, so many purchases in that period of time that they actually had more opportunities to go look back at a prior appraisal. And then obviously there's all the borrower and other, criteria that they use to decide on waivers. It's not just that, clearly. There was a lot more to go refer to. They could offer a lot more waivers.
Yeah.
But right now it's tracking about 10%.
About 10%. It's a tough nut to crack here because as an appraiser, I don't want appraisal waivers. I want them to order appraisals on everything as a practitioner. And Jeff Bradford, a friend of mine, I think has made a great statement, and I champion this with him. All valuations should be done by appraisers. I love that idea. Forget about evaluations, or evaluations can be done if they're done by appraisers. So I'm a big advocate for that. But as a consumer, if I'm refinancing one of my properties, or when we bought the condo in Nashville about 5-6 years ago, they said, we don't even know if we'll get an appraisal. And Simon, it didn't matter to me. I didn't. We were buying that. I didn't care what the appraiser said. It was the very last condo. I got what I thought was a really good deal on it. I was buying it regardless. the seller wasn't going to come down in that price. He had two backup offers. One was cash.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what the appraiser said. So as a consumer, I could kind of see where, gosh, that would have saved me $600, $700, whatever it was. I really don't care. But as an appraiser, that hurts my heart to say that, So I don't know. Maybe folks will like to hear that it's 10%. I'm like you guys. I would rather them not do any. Let's move on to number 6. You said automated valuation models. We know those as AVMs, and AI will replace appraisers. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I think if you get into that section a little, right? I mean, we often see that there's pushback or there's questions about the value from an appraisal, and it comes down to a few $1,000s often, right? If you look at the way AVMs are built, and I've got a trivia question for you actually. Coming up, yeah.
All right.
I mean, I don't know the answer, but I'll be really interested in what people's guesses are. But yeah, so when it comes to AVMs, the way they measure accuracy is this PP10. But basically, it says, an AVM is plus or minus 10% of the value, the actual sale price of the property, and the high, pretty much the highest, accuracy rating, for want of a better description, is 95%. So 95% of the time, it's plus or minus 10%. I mean, plus or minus 10% is not going to work in originations, is it? In the way that we sort of see appraisals working. So I think AVMs have a hugely important role. They are run by the GSEs. They're run by a lot of organizations for all sorts of other purposes. But I don't think there's something that is going to be used in the primary market for first lien originations.
Okay.
But my trivia question is this: how many AVMs, and we're talking about residential real estate, how many AVMs do you think are run in the US every month?
Oh, wow. That's a great, I have no earthly idea. You stumped me. Do you have a,
I don't know, but you know what my guess is, which my guess is, and so we're talking, there's probably about 120 million properties in the US, right, that you could run an AVM on. I think the number is probably something like 40 billion AVMs per month.
Oh my gosh.
It's huge, right? So you can see. Yeah, I know it's staggering. There's some individual companies, vendors that run over $1 billion. So you can see.
I'm making a note, Simon, how to start
So,
how to start an AVM company. I'm just making a quick note, right? Oh my goodness.
The only reason I say that is because you can see that they have obviously huge utility, right, in servicing. You've got to value loans. You've got to value the mortgage servicing rights. You've got to, there's people doing a lot of marketing. They're looking at how much equity people have in properties. There's even people completely outside of mortgage that are, really trying to understand what sort of equity people, basically what funds they have available for home upgrades and all sorts of other things. So there's huge uses for AVMs, and and the uses are ever growing, right? But it's just, are they ever going to replace an appraisal? I don't think so.
Yeah. I've argued many times that I think that a machine, and with AI, I mean, my gosh, it's getting really good. It's sometimes scary what AI can do. And for my listeners, if you haven't played around with it a little bit, come on, jump on the boat, because it can handle a lot of daily tasks for you. It really can. But the one thing I don't think that it can do is, I've said many times that there's no two pieces of dirt on the planet exactly the same, right? Just like we as human beings, we're different. There's no two humans exactly alike. There's no two properties exactly alike. And for that reason, I think that it's going to be a challenge getting a machine to do what we do, because we're trying to measure something that is simply immeasurable. We're trying to measure human behavior, and we've got to just use our sharpest tool in the appraiser toolbox, which to me is judgment. Good judgment is the appraiser's sharpest tool. And a computer doesn't have judgment, right? It doesn't have that human element of judgment. So, hey, Simon, don't go anywhere. I've got a few more questions for you, but I gotta do a little business here right quick. So, I'd like to again thank our sponsor, LIA Administrators and Insurance. You know, for 45 years, they've been offering E&O insurance to valuation professionals just like you and me. LIA applies superior customer service, exceptional liability education to serve well over 10,000 real estate professionals all across the country. They offer commercial bonds, general liability, cyber liability, and so much more. Visit liability.com to learn more about how LIA can help protect you as well as your business. Thanks again, LIA. We certainly appreciate your continued support. All right, Mr. Simon, I'm back to you. You in your article talk a little bit about the UAD redesign and the URAR. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I did a podcast recently. You know, Hal and I were down at Fannie Mae's headquarters in Dallas, getting a little training in preparation to start training appraisers on what's coming. And this is coming. I have to say, I also have been like, I've been hearing about this for years. Is it really coming? Now they're saying next year. Yeah, I'll worry about it when it really happens, but it's coming. So in your blog, you mentioned this UAD redesign. Talk a little bit about that for the listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I would be the last person to ask about the details of it, but what I would say is that I think it's like the inspection-based waivers and all the new technology that's going into completing inspections. I think it's a massive multi-year undertaking for the GSEs to revamp the appraisal process. And I think, like you were talking about AVMs, it's all about, I think, collecting data, unambiguous data, that can be used to, understand the risk profile and the risk management profile over time of loans that are then securitized and, frankly, purchased by investors around the globe. So I think I put it in that context. It's a massive undertaking for the GSEs and all the vendors, by the way. I mean, it's a huge retooling, but it's there just to improve, risk management and just the loan origination process over time. So I think there'll be benefits. It's going to be a big change, but there'll be benefits, in the coming years from it for sure.
Yeah, and we've heard Fannie and Freddie both say, if our plan was to get rid of appraisers, why would we have had this, as to your point, Simon, the multi-year project and millions upon millions of dollars in figuring this out if they're just going to get rid of appraisers? I mean, that defies common sense, right? So you have FIRREA and appraisals. And FIRREA, guys, remember, Simon, correct me if I'm wrong, Financial Institution Reform, Recovery, and Enforcement Act of 1989. I think I got it right. So talk about FIRREA and appraisals.
Well, I mean, the even though there are a lot of exemptions, the biggest of which being kind of the agencies, but the FIRREA really basically says I mean, this is kind of a key point, right? Appraisals can be completed by appraisers. That's it. There's evaluations, and that's something different. That can be, that's something different under, I think it's still $400,000, which gets used a lot. Especially in home equity, right? I mean, proprietary. I mean, I definitely encourage appraisers to ask, whether they working directly with banks and credit unions or working through appraisal firms or management companies, to ask about those proprietary desktops, because there are a lot of them, and they do absolutely need appraisers to be able to complete those products. And I think that's also part of the future of the modernization programs that the GSEs are releasing. They're on their way to releasing those, right? There will be more of that ability for appraisers to do desktop work versus just doing the inspection and the desktop. So I think FIRREA is important, because FIRREA is certainly important to investors. They need valuations that are FIRREA compliant, that that can be, that can be obviously, and that is an appraisal, but it can be some other things as well, including AVMs actually in certain circumstances.
So I want to hold off on this last point. I'm going to read it, but don't opine on it yet. Okay. His last item in this blog, number 10, says the future of appraising and appraisals is being designed by appraisers. So hold that thought, Simon. And I really want you to dig into that in a minute. But before we do, you said something earlier at the beginning of our broadcast here. You said that part of what your company does is identify, what lenders are doing what products and maybe what lenders are doing the most volume. That kind of piqued my interest a little bit, and it may have piqued some of my listeners and some of my audience. If there's appraisers out there that said, "Gosh, I'd kind of like to know what lenders are doing the biggest volume," because I want to solicit them, right? Is that something? And I don't know the answer to this. Hence, our broadcast for everybody watching or listening is not scripted. I just came up with this, and Simon doesn't know what I'm going to ask him, but if somebody's listening or watching and they're like, man, I'd like to get the top 10 list, Simon, or the top 50 list or top 5 list, is that something that they can get from you or subscribe, or I don't know the process, or if it's even available, but that might be something. Hey, what are the top 10 lenders in my area? Because I want to go out and reach out to them. Is that a service you provide?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we're trying to provide cost-effective solutions really to people, however they want to buy them. It could be a one-time ad hoc report, could be a subscription, it could be for a part of the country, all of the country. But that's one of the things I would say is that there are a lot more lenders than people realize. And if you went and looked at the top 10 list 10 years ago, would Rocket have been on it? Maybe. But the top 10 list or the top 20 list changes pretty dramatically from year to year. So there's something like 1,800 GSE sellers who sell directly. There's another 2 or 3 thousand independent mortgage companies, that are then selling to those aggregators. There's 2 or 3 thousand banks and credit unions, all of whom are originating first mortgages, second mortgages, HELOCs, all of so I think on a regional basis or a local basis, there's probably a lot more opportunity to engage people than you think. But yeah, you can definitely, I'm sure we'll put the links in at the end. You can definitely click on the link and fill out a request form, and we can give you some ideas of how to get the data that you're looking for.
That's great. And you just mentioned in that answer, and I think this is an area where a lot of appraisers don't think about, is credit unions. I mean, credit unions do a tremendous amount of volume in the communities in which they serve, and we tend to bypass them or don't think of those very often. But they need appraisals too, don't they?
Yeah, and they do less agency work, but they do a lot of home equity work, and still a lot of that does require either traditional appraisals or some type of proprietary desktop
Very
that
good.
they've approved. They've sometimes designed and approved, right?
Yeah, very good. Well, you've actually piqued my curiosity, because we had a list of, I don't know, 150 lenders we were going through and seeing if we had. You're talking about 1,800, 2,000. I might have to give you a call outside this podcast and get a bigger list, right? So the very last thing in your blog, and we'll close out with this: the future of appraising and appraisals is being designed by appraisers. What do you mean by that?
And this, well, what I mean by that, and going back to the blog that I responded to, Fannie Mae's latest attempt to eradicate appraisers, I'm like, well, the reason I sort of called the gentleman who authored it was that's just never been my experience. So working with the GSEs and other agencies, I mean, who are designing this, they're all appraisers. I mean, they're all senior appraisers. They've been selected by, hired by, recruited by the GSEs. So I think they've risen to the top of their profession. They're helping kind of chart the course for the industry.
Yeah.
They get a lot of flack for doing that sometimes, right? Because not everybody agrees on the way forward. But I think I think that's a much better scenario, right? Than having people who are just maybe, outside of the industry and not having an appreciation for the, some of the things that you've talked about, Bryan, the nuances of appraising and individual pieces of dirt and all the nuances that go into that.
Yeah, yeah. Simon Blackburn, thank you so much for spending a little time with me, and thank you, Lori Egan, for introducing me to Simon. She's the one that kind of put us together. But it's been great spending a little bit of time and getting to know you and about your company. So, MtgeFi, how can somebody? It's MtgeFi.com, I believe, right? That's the website. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, Simon, what's the best way for them to reach out to you directly?
Yeah, it's literally Simon@MtgeFi.com. So Simon at MtgeFi, MTGEFi.com.
Easy enough. We got to get you out to one of the conferences here real soon. I'd like to meet you.
I was at Val Expo actually.
Oh, okay. Well, you gotta come grab me next time. I missed you out there. Oh, I think Lori had mentioned that you were going to be out there, and I guess we just didn't cross paths while we were there. But again, Simon, thank you so much for being here. We certainly appreciate you carving out some time to spend with us at the Appraisal Update podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Bryan. I really appreciate the invite. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Appraisal Update podcast brought to you by Appraiser eLearning. Take a mini vacation. I just got back from one of my favorite places in the world, Charleston, South Carolina. I got to spend we took my daughter and her new husband out there and did a little haunted tours and did a little horseback riding and boat riding and eating oysters every day, and just had a wonderful time in Charleston. If you've never been there, check it out, Charleston, South Carolina. It's a wonderful place. But take yourself a little mini vacation. You better get ready. I think you're about to start getting busy. I know you're ready. I am too. Bring on the work, right? But take a little time out for yourself. I talked to somebody recently. They work 7 days a week. They work nights. I said, look, life's too short. Take a step back, 1 or 2 steps back. Take 2 nights off a week. Do something. There's more to life than just appraising, although that's most of our lives, day in and day out. Make some money. Enjoy yourself. And until next time, for Simon Blackburn, I'm your host, Bryan Reynolds. Happy appraising.
The Appraisal Update podcast is brought to you by Appraiser eLearning.